Kristin Sullivan. I'm the Executive Director here at the Ward Museum, and we are excited today to talk to Dan Burgette, one of our 2020 to 2021 living legends. And Dan began carving about 40 years ago while working at the George Rogers Clark National Historic Park in Indiana. He first came to Ocean City to compete at the World Championship back in 1989. And after initially winning second in the novice division, Dan worked his way all the way up to Best in World Interpretive Wood Sculpture in 2001. He's since won many other ribbons for interpretive and bronze work, including Best in World in the interpretive category again in 2011 and Best in Show Wildlife Sculpture in 2018. Dan's a signature member of the Society of Animal Artists and Artists for Conservation, and he's an elected member of the National Sculpture Society. So welcome, Dan. Thank you for being with us today.
Oh, I'm looking forward to chatting with you.
Awesome, thank you. So tell us a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and how you got into wildfowl art.
Well, I was born in Indiana and have a bachelor's and master's in conservation from Purdue University. And my first job was with the National Park Service down at George Rogers Clark National Historical Park in Vincennes, Indiana. And I had a boss that came in from Redwood National Park, and his wife had a decoy that had been carved with a chainsaw. And I thought it would be really cool to have a decoy, but we were totally dirt poor. So part of my duties there at the park was to dress up as a frontiersman and sit under a tree and whittle while I talked to the tourists about the Revolutionary War. And so I went out and got a chunk of tulip poplar limb and brought that back, and I carved my first duck decoy with my historically accurate tomahawk. And I didn't have a very good idea what a duck looked like, and it was very crude, but based on that, my wife got me some X-Acto knives, and it went on from there.
What was the first species you made? Do you remember?
Well, the first one was a canvasback.
Very nice. And did you have any teachers or inspirations in your early days?
No, I really didn't. After being at George Rogers Clark, I was lucky enough to transfer to Grand Teton National Park. And the park dispatcher there was Mary Klein, and her parents, Joe and Martha Klein, had a carving shop back in Pennsylvania. And so they kind of helped me along, and they talked to me about the World Show. And so at first I sent things to them, and they entered some things in novice, and then eventually I went out to the show and saw it for myself. And so that's kind of how I got started.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So why birds? Why is that sort of your subject matter?
Well, being a ranger and did a lot of stuff in the backcountry in the Tetons. I was exposed to charismatic megafauna like grizzly bears and elk and those things too. But birds, they're around us all the time, and they really enliven the natural setting. Obviously the Tetons are a tremendous scenic setting, but to really bring that to life, having the birds fly and flitter and vocalize and all that, it really brings things alive. And so I've really connected with birds over the years.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And what's something that you've learned over the years that you wish you knew when you were younger?
Oh, there were a lot of things. I was mainly pretty clueless about most of life starting out, but eventually
running with carving.
So, but in the carving world, I really learned a lot from going to the World Show, having pieces critiqued. I think that's a real advantage for up and coming carvers, that you can really pick the brains of more experienced people. And so there were a lot of little tricks along the way. And I really encourage people to seek out those more experienced carvers, because my experience is that people are really open to helping other carvers to really help the art form. And I have some real heroes. Peter Palumbo is probably the top of that list, although there's certainly others on that list. But Pete's been just a wonderful mentor. He's really taken his time to critique my pieces through the years, And it's been really extremely valuable.
It's fantastic. Is there any advice that you would tell a novice carver artist starting out?
Well, the main thing is to show up. You need to show up every day, or whatever. That it doesn't take a lot of talent to be an artist, but it takes doing it, day after day after day. And if you do anything for 10,000 hours, they say you're going to be an expert. And I think the same is true with bird carving. And then as you develop the basic skills, it's easier to morph into your own style, or kind of gravitate towards the things that really turn you on, and you can focus on those.
Mm-hmm. Sure, makes sense. Now, along the way, I'm sure you learned lessons, and I'm wondering if you can tell us about just a colossal failure that you had, just something that didn't go right at all, and then maybe what you learned from it, or how you moved on.
Well, actually, I've never totally given up on a piece. I've never had to throw one away, and it's things. It's always an opportunity to try to figure out how to get out of the corner you've painted yourself into, and you learn along the way. And another thing that it's been a real advantage is years ago I decided that I wanted to reach out and have a good carving friend. I just decided Ashley Gray was going to be the guy, and so anyway, Ashley and I connected, and whenever I got into a jam, I'd call Ashley, because he had done it, and he had all these little tricks about how to, when a piece breaks, how do you glue it together? Well, he uses wood glue, and then he put a big callus of hot melt glue around it to hold it there as the clamp, and that was a wonderful trick. I wanted to carve a flock of birds, and I carved a piece called Peep Show. It had 5 small sandpipers flying over a wave, and that piece, just because of the cracks in the log and various things, it broke 100 times. But using Ashley's trick, is no problem. And it's a wonderful piece, and now it's part of the permanent collection of the National Museum of Wildlife Art in Jackson, Wyoming. But it's I took a 200-pound log and saved the best 4.5 pounds, and now it's sitting over there.
Wow. I know you work in multiple media. Can you talk a little bit about the different media you work in, and how you select maybe what piece is going to be in what, bronze or wood or other?
I don't really have a good answer to that. I do work with stone, carving soapstone. You can use the same wood carving tools you use. So I've done more in soapstone, but I've recently gotten into hard rock also, where you have to use diamond things. But it's basically the same process. It's just different tools. And I've also used metal to forge stainless steel or titanium to support air currents. And actually, let me turn around. I'll show you one piece that happens to be sitting here right now. This is shadowed breezes, and so there's a soapstone shadow underneath a walnut bird, and then that's supported by the stainless steel air currents. And that piece is a good example of kind of a multimedia piece. And the reason I have it is that it just sold, and the collector wants a different base on it. They actually want a table. So I'm going to be doing a 40-inch long golden mean ellipse table that I'll carve waves into the top and make a walnut table for that.
Oh, that sounds phenomenal.
But I got into the metal partially because carvers, if you're going to try to put a bird in the air, you have a problem that oftentimes you end up with a bird on a stick. Mm-hmm. And to get away from that bird on a stick thing, I tried to visualize that birds are at home in this medium we can't really see called the air, all these millions of molecules. And as they fly through that medium, they disturb those molecules in different ways, depending on the speed, the size of the bird. There's different variables, and trying to visualize how those molecules are being disturbed, and then carve those and use those as the support. And so for this one, I have streamers of air currents coming off, and then those morph into the stainless steel air current, which turns into the support for the bird.
Yeah.
And so in thinking about doing some of those things, as you get into really thin, long pieces of wood, it's not strong enough.
Right.
So that led me to the medium of using metal, and because you can make things long and skinny that are still strong. And so it's kind of whatever medium that kind of solved the problem I was wrestling with, I was willing to try.
That's great. Interesting. Right. Now what's your favorite part about carving competitions, and how long have you been coming to Worlds? Two different questions I smushed together. Sorry.
Yeah, I think the first time was in what'd you say, 89 or something?
Yes. Yeah.
So I've been coming since then, and then after I won in 2001, I really, I felt a real need to support the Ward Foundation. I've been there every year since then, and because the Ward Foundation really, it is the flagship for this whole art form, and I think it's important for artists to support the Ward Foundation. So that's kind of, what was the first part of the question?
Thank you. What's your favorite part about carving competitions? And
well, I certainly seeing all the incredible work that other artists do is a real attraction. But probably the most important is interacting with the other carvers, and just like interacting with people like Pete Palumbo and some of these folks. You learn to expand your own horizons. Oftentimes we're hanging out in our own studios and we're working and not really interacting, and it really does help to reach out, and it's really neat having relationships. Like Lynn Branson calls me from Canada, and that's a real neat thing. And so actually going to the competitions and getting to chat with folks face to face and catch up on what they and their families are doing and all that's been a real bonus for going to the competitions.
That's fantastic. It's neat to watch the sort of community of carvers gather. It's great. What is a piece that you've created that maybe required you to grow as an artist into a realm you hadn't considered before, or maybe caused you to stretch?
Well, it seems like I'm always on a learning curve, and it seems like a lot of my carvings start with just kind of a vague idea. It was like the Peep Show that I wanted to carve a flock of birds, and so I have a bit of a sketch in my workbook of a flock of birds with air currents and some of that. But that was a real trick, because how do you engineer all the interconnections? And I originally thought that each bird had to be connected by 3 points just to be strong enough. Mm-hmm. And eventually that got down to 2, and then I screwed up, and actually there was one place that the top 3 birds are only supported by 1 point. Mm-hmm. But those engineering things are kind of an interesting part of the puzzle, and the wood carving is a really neat thing, because you have to not just carve wood, but you have to figure out how everything goes together. You need to know a lot about the bird itself. You get into the design and composition. Larry Barth is the total master on that, and I read his book repeatedly just because there's so much wisdom in it, and that I agree with Larry that the real frontier is design and competition, or composition, more than just the technical things of how to carve a feather or paint the bird or whatever. And so those decisions are an interesting thing that really makes you grow, trying to figure out how to do things and to achieve, your goal. And then I think through that process, that's how you get to your own style. There's, tremendous, specialization. It's like Jeff Bernay is, in my opinion, the best decoy carver, that's ever been. And there's certainly some other tremendous ones out there, Tom Christie, and there's a bunch of them. But Jet is just, he really captures that essence of the bird. And so he's really specialized in that. And so I think that the whole carving process is a real interesting thing that intellectually it lets you go wherever your mind wants to go.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. What do you think is the most difficult part of your process, and how do you deal with that?
I think the most difficult part is figuring out what to do. There's seems like there's a lot of time. Sometimes you get an idea, like one time I was going to do a kingfisher coming out of the water with a fish in its mouth and all that sort of stuff. And I spent 24 hours, doing a clay model and all that. And then I went down under the house where I have my wood, and I chopped this big redwood log in two and brought up the piece, and it wasn't big enough.
No.
And so I didn't have enough wood. And so I threw the thing into my vise and I just carved it. And it is one of those things that it turned into a sharp-shinned hawk coming through a feeder. And there were 3 other birds swirling away. It's called Feeder Frenzy. And it won the world in 2011. And that was one that I didn't plan. It just kind of flowed because of the grain of the wood was and all that sort of stuff. There's other things where you really you have an idea and you have to find a piece of wood and you take the wood and have your way with it and end up with it. But the whole process of trying to figure out what to do is a real challenge. I think that's my biggest thing.
Has that gotten any easier over the years with practice, or is it still stump you as much as in the early days? Or do you have a process for figuring that out at this point?
No, it's still a challenge. I've spent most of the winter working on a large bronze of a flying raven with a robin harassing its upper wing. And it's quite a large piece, 45 inches tall or something. And after I got done with that, I spent 2 or 3 weeks just trying to figure out what I was going to do next, with a lot of just kind of researching things and doing some drawings and this and that and the other thing. And, gradually you work into your next project, but that whole thing, it's not a real simple thing.
Yeah, sure. All right. Let's see here. And so you asked about the most difficult part of the process. What's the most rewarding part of your process?
I think the most rewarding thing is that I have a theory that everyone wants to create something, and I'm blessed to be able to create things that I value, but also other people value. But even if it's just things that I value, it's still worthwhile to be able to, show my grandkids, what I can do or whatever. So I think that's the most rewarding thing is being able to create things. And obviously I'm trying to create real art. And when something is a successful piece of art, that's rewarding.
That's great. Okay. 2 more questions. One, just for fun. What's something we don't know about you? What's a hidden talent or hobby or something unrelated to wood carving or sculpture?
Well, I have a history of being a mountain climber.
Oh.
I was on the Jenny Lake Rescue Team in Grand Teton National Park for for 27 years, and I was in charge of that when I retired. And so I spent a lot of time in the mountains and going out and rescuing people that needed it. And then, when I got old, you can't carry enough stuff to do a long trip in the wilderness. I'm a real wilderness kind of proponent or supporter. And when I retired, the National Park Service gave me the Wilderness Champion Award. It was a national award. And so anyhow, after I retired, I'd always, years ago, I'd done some canoeing, but I'd always read the stories of Sig Olson and various people for canoeing, up north. And one of the retired climbing rangers it started doing canoe trips. And so I started doing canoe trips into the Arctic. And actually, on those trips, I've seen wildlife that has ended up in, quite a number of my pieces, actually. And those trips where you go out for 40 days, you don't see anyone else, and you're kind of immersed in the wilderness, and you see amazing things that you might read about, I guess, but you can actually experience them. And that's really, been wonderful.
That's really cool. Fantastic. Okay. And then lastly, just as one of the 2020 to 2021 living legends, is there anything that you'd like to say to your mentors, peers, friends, and others who might be watching this?
Well, I'm just really grateful for all of the Ward Foundation and the people associated with them have done for me and to help me be the artist that I am. Because I don't have an art background. I didn't go to art school or anything like that. And the going to the seminars at the Ward shows and some of those things were places that I was able to pick up some of the skills that I needed. And I just can't tell you how important the Ward Foundation and the World Show it has been, for my art career.
Thank you. I'm getting emotional. It's great. Well, we really appreciate you being part of the extended family and coming to the shows and for everything you do for the Ward Foundation, Ward Museum, and I congratulate you on being a living legend. And I really look forward to celebrating in person next year with you.
And if I could put in one more plug.
Sure.
Years ago on the Decoy Card Forum, there was a little thing that said that the World Show needed help, by volunteers, because volunteers are so important.
Yep.
And so at that point, I said, yeah, that's one good way to give back to the show.
Yep.
And so since that time, every year, I've been a runner to help set up the show, and I've done a couple other things. But I really encourage people to get involved as a volunteer. You get to know some of the other folks that come back year after year. And it's really a great tradition to be a volunteer at the Ward Show. So I really encourage, younger carvers, you don't have to be an expert to be a runner or to do some of these other things. So volunteer.
Thank you very much for that plug. Yeah, it takes a crew of about 150 plus each year to put on the World Show. And there's a job for absolutely anybody who's willing to sign up. We'll put you to work, and you get to learn a lot of the behind the scenes workings and get to know other carvers. And thank you. Yes, we're very grateful for your work as a volunteer and everybody else, because it wouldn't happen without the volunteers. So thank you. All right. Well, I look forward to working with you as a volunteer next year and then celebrating you at the Living Legends celebration next year in Ocean City. So thank you so much, Dan.
Okay. Thanks, Sue.